Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We should have a lot of fun today. Can everyone hear? I'm Aline Van Beber. I'm the president of this league. I'm pleased to welcome everybody. Today it's special because the program is one of our own. Colette Pancho is going to be your speaker. And why? Well, because she recently presented her findings from the United Nations to the Kansas League in Great Bend. And today, she's pleased to come and share her experiences with us. Colette's our membership chair, so you may have heard from her before in that capacity. She and Jody Grigsby are co-chairs this year who serve, and she serves on our nominating committee as well. Colette's other community service is not negligible. It includes being past chair for the Overland Parks Neighborhood Engagement Committee with the commissioners, as well as being chair of her own neighborhood's steering committee. She received her Bachelor's of Journalism from Mizzou and her Master's of Social Gerontology from the University of Central Missouri. Colette has participated in leadership Overland Park, and she has served on the Framework Overland Parks Steering Committee, which updated the city's comprehensive plan. So if you like it, let her know, and if you don't like it, let her know that too. Colette participated, Colette and her wife, Melissa James, who is here today. Melissa, wave your hand. She is also a member of the Johnson County League, and they live in northern Overland Park. And Colette's mom, Carol Pancho, raise your hand, lives nearby them. Lucky them, lucky her. Welcome, Colette, please.
Gotta get my notes up here. That's why I always bring a backup. All right. Well, hello, humans. That's a greeting I received from an African delegate, and it embodied the "we are all in this together" spirit of the Commission on the Status of Women. Just seeing the United Nations was on my bucket list, but spending 2 weeks with thousands of global leaders where human rights defenders have walked those halls and espoused egalitarian ideals for generations was an honor of a lifetime. The United Nations headquarters, let's go to the next slide, please. So United Nations headquarters, as you can see there, the tall building, and there's many surrounding it, is on 18 acres in Manhattan, in New York City, overlooking the East River. It's a beautiful site. At the top of your screen, let's stay on that slide, please, thank you. Top of your screen, there's 193 flags that represent each voting member of the United Nations, plus 2 other flags that represent Vatican City and the State of Palestine as permanent observers of the United Nations. At the center of your screen is the famous nonviolence sculpture, also known as the knotted gun. And this sculpture symbolizes peace and the end of conflict. It was created by a Swedish artist in 1980 following the murder of John Lennon. And inside the spacious lobby, which you see on the right-hand side, is a popular life-size sculpture of Nelson Mandela in a pose of greeting, where guests like me love to take photos. Next slide, please. A small bronze bust of Eleanor Roosevelt sits in a quiet corner of the UN in recognition of her service as a U.S. delegate to the UN from 1945 to 1952, and again in 1961. She notably served as the first chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights and was one of 15 female delegates at the inaugural Commission on the Status of Women in 1946, who helped draft the United Nations Universal Declaration for Human Rights. So this group of women was very important. They ensured that women's perspective was included in this declaration, where it had not been before. And this still serves as the basis for international human rights law. So if you have not read the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, it is very inspiring. So Eleanor Roosevelt's role in securing the adoption of the Declaration for Human Rights and her decades of work after for human rights earned her the nickname First Lady of the World. So all 30 articles of the Universal Declaration for Human Rights are illustrated and framed on a long wall inside the headquarters. I stood there really in awe of them, reading them all together on a big wall. And very simple illustrations. Stay there, I'm sorry. Go back one. Thank you. So you can see a few of them, that reading these concise expressions of humankind's higher nature in a place where these ideals are embraced and defended was very moving. I am grateful to represent you at the League of Women Voters, and also to be a link in the unbroken chain of leaders who have participated in the Commission on the Status of Women. Next slide. So this was the 70th annual, and it is the largest gathering in the world focused on setting and measuring global standards for gender equality and women's rights. The event provides a space to build partnerships and solidarity, and we did. It took place in March, the 9th through the 20th, and it was attended by more than 10,000 in-person and virtual delegates from 110 countries. And here's the good news. Each year, any of us can go to New York City and participate in the sessions adjacent to the United Nations headquarters with panel discussions by civil society organizations from around the world, which were as informative as the sessions inside the United Nations. This year, there were 670 sessions. So you've heard of fear of missing out? I had that. You wanted to be one place, but you really couldn't do it all. So if you want to jot down this website, NGOCSW.org, that is the organizer of these sessions, and I'll tell you in a minute how you could be a delegate and apply if you applied as well. But this way, you can go and spend time in New York City. I want to sincerely thank my Johnson County League friends and sponsors, members, for your generous support so I could attend this conference. Next slide. The theme of CSW 70 was ensuring and strengthening access to justice. Those were the three key words: access to justice for all women and girls by promoting inclusive and equitable legal systems, eliminating discriminatory laws, policies, and practices, and addressing structural barriers. If those goals sound lofty, they are. But the delegates were as ambitious. So in 2026, as wars are raging and women's rights are under attack globally, the CSW 70 delegates that I met have remained steadfast in their commitment to protecting women and girls in their countries and far beyond, despite being underrepresented in their governments or being at risk for violence for their visibility. Globally, women occupy less than 30% of governmental positions, and this percentage has actually declined over the past few decades. But Meaningful progress on gender equality and human rights continues to be made. And we know that informal power is just as real as institutional power. Women need more of both. The delegates I met demonstrated how they organize in formal and informal groups, they gather data, they craft positions, and they very skillfully partner with governments. They get things done despite opposition from well-funded and powerful patriarchal systems. We will talk about how we can follow their lead and push for progress locally. So 20 League of Women Voters members, what you see here gathered from around the United States, were chosen to be CSW delegates from applications that were submitted. I saw the opportunity in the National League's monthly newsletter in November of 2025. We will post this opportunity in the Voter so all who are interested can apply as well. So the League of Women Voters has a long and proud tradition of advocating for peace and gender equality at the United Nations. About half of our delegates are shown here because some of them stayed 1 week of the 2, others the whole time. I stayed for 2. And we are pictured in front of a beautiful bronze globe that was donated by Italy many years ago. The League of Women Voters of the U.S. co-sponsored a panel discussion that was quite powerful. It was called Corruption Never Victimless, the case for the International Anti-Corruption Court. Let me repeat that. The International Anti-Corruption Court. And this is a case which has been building momentum to prosecute kleptocrats and repatriate money to the countries of origin. Kleptocrats are defined as governmental leaders or officials who use their power to steal, embezzle, or misappropriate national resources and public funds for their personal gain. It was shocking to learn how common it is for money to be used and misused in this way, and how it harms the citizens most in need. So I applaud the League for taking on that issue. I think we skipped a slide, maybe? Okay, go ahead. All right. So here are some faces of the friends I made at the United Nations. So the woman in the blue headdress is from Brazil. The center photo is Elin Kaku, who's the permanent representative of Finland to the United Nations. So we met some very high-level ministers at this as well. On the other side is my new friend Hirose Megumi, Senior Director of the Office of Gender Equality and Poverty Reduction in the Governance and Peacebuilding Department of the Japan International Cooperation Agency. She has one remarkable title. And when I got business cards, I'm like, wow. I kept seeing titles like this. I mean, they had the word gender equality, cooperation. I mean, they were really terrific. Next slide. This is a group that organized a talk, and all the panels were multiple people. So this was a talk from Canada and the United States, talking about the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, which we will talk about in a moment. And they modeled international cooperation the way women do it. Next slide. These folks, we have Mildred, Karina, and Anais from Cancun and Mexico City. And I enjoyed speaking Spanish to them over lunch, which was great practice for me, but hopefully not too tedious for them. They proudly showed me several photos of them posing with Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum. I was continually impressed by my colleagues who represented grassroots organizations from around the world. The diplomats who represented the United Nations itself were referred to as His Excellency, Her Excellency, and the tone of their discussions was refreshingly respectful and high-minded. I could have stayed in those hallowed halls forever. I learned about a variety of issues from civil society organizations like the League of Women Voters of the United States, who are working hard to make the world a more sustainable and safe place for women and girls. Some of these human rights defenders have served on the front lines for decades, and others are fresh to the fight. But all inspired me with their courage and creativity in a climate of fierce opposition to hard-earned gains for women. No country seemed immune to the pushback, but I am here to reassure you that these women leaders push back harder and smarter. So these human rights defenders, they protect the dignity of women and girls in so many ways. I attended heart-rending and inspiring panel discussions on topics such as wartime cooperation between Poland and the Ukraine, achieving gender justice in Taiwan, responding to the displacement of LGBTI people, protecting rights-based Nordic family policies, preventing human trafficking in Ireland and India, curbing global government corruption, working for peace and free elections in Haiti, overcoming ageism and sexism in the media, advocating for women and safety in Sudan and Gaza, advancing women's leadership in the Ukraine and Rwanda, supporting women farmers, addressing the gender gap in caregiving, closing the global funding gap for women's initiatives, and making AI companies accountable for accelerating gender-based violence, as the European Union is doing in a very systematic way. The delegates, next, thank you. The delegates and their colleagues back home are taking orchestrated action, but patriarchal systems are deeply entrenched. In Gaza, survivors and their supporters in academia are documenting the violence to help stop the conflict. In Sudan, women inside the country, as well as outside, are advocating for peace in this internal armed conflict and staggering humanitarian crisis. After the conference, I was heartened to learn that the UN has launched a $1.6 billion regional appeal to support the millions fleeing the Sudanese conflict. In Haiti, where 90% of the country is run by gangs, the parliament is composed of only 3% women, and women and girls experience daily violence. But local activists continue to push for overdue elections and serve in government. In New Mexico, researchers and advocates are stemming the tide of indigenous women and girls who go missing or are murdered in alarming numbers still. They also address the harm from hundreds of abandoned lead mines that cause high rates of cancer among the members of New Mexico's 23 tribes. A powerful indigenous presenter from New Mexico described her way of getting things done as a spider web. If you hit a snag, pivot. Another snag, pivot again, until the web is complete. I want to highlight for us a global treaty called CEDAW, C-E-D-A-W, that you may have heard of. I had not, but it's a very important treaty. CEDAW stands for the Convention to End All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It has been a focus area of the Commission on the status of women for decades, and it still has powerful applications for us locally. CEDAW is truly at the intersection of local policy and international human rights. It is a United Nations treaty, also known as the International Bill of Rights for Women. 189 of the current UN member states have signed it. It is notable that there are 30 articles in CEDAW, the same number as the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. President Carter signed this treaty in 1980, but it has not been ratified in our country due to concerns about potential conflicts with U.S. law, regulating abortion, as well as family planning language in the treaty. CEDAW has been brought up by several U.S. presidents for ratification over the years, but has been blocked each time in the U.S. Senate. Notably, the United States is the only developed democratic nation that has signed but not ratified this treaty. The 5 other countries that have not ratified the treaty are Iran, Sudan, Somalia, Tonga, and Palau. When neither CEDAW or the Equal Rights Amendment was ratified by the United States, civil society groups saw CEDAW as an alternative on the state and local level. Why? Because CEDAW provides the necessary legal baseline to hold governments accountable for the rights of women and girls. That's simple. More than 70 cities and states, the states of California, Oregon, and Kentucky, have ratified CEDAW and committed to eliminating gender discrimination in many areas. The main ones are political participation, education, employment, and marriage and family law. So when you leave today, there will be copies of CEDAW resolutions from other places and declarations from states, and you will receive a handout that summarizes the treaty's articles, which really are as relevant now as when it was first ratified by the United Nations in 1981, when I graduated from high school. CEDAW is truly the descendant of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which means that the League of Women Voters of Johnson County and our community partners can literally continue the work of Eleanor Roosevelt. Next slide. So we are going to show you a video, and I'll describe it for you. Los Angeles County won the global leadership from a group called Cities for CEDAW for their years of working to improve local gender justice, as well as their pioneering gender impact assessment program. So let's listen to Lindsay Horvath, a supervisor from LA County's 3rd District. Next slide when you get a chance. So, has CEDAW... Hold on a little minute. This was a great meeting I attended, by the way, but it's a little long. She is one of the co-chairs of the group that organizes the CSW 70, and these women are just so dedicated. And to put together a conference this large every year is quite a task, so I'm glad you got to hear from her. So, I think, let's see, did you miss a slide right there, maybe? Okay, let's go there. All right, so did you know that in 2024, the city of Kansas City, Missouri passed a resolution about CEDAW? So they passed this resolution in 2024, and shortly afterward, the city established the Women's Commission. They also passed a measure to close the gender pay gap, which we know still persists. It is notable that Kansas City was a pioneer in passing CEDAW legislation or resolutions, being one of the earliest municipalities outside of California to do so. On the right, you see a picture of Alice Kitchen. Some of you may have known her. She recently passed away last year, and she and her colleagues partnered with the Kansas City-based Women's Foundation, now renamed United WE, to pass the resolution, and they made sure to follow up after its passage to monitor the results and keep the city accountable. Alice was also a member of the League of Women Voters of Kansas City, Missouri, which now represents KC and Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties. Alice did so much for our city that she has a Wikipedia page. So let's take a look at what was in that resolution. It was resolution number 141045. And it focused on several big things. It focused on pay equity, the lack of childcare, prevalence of older women in poverty, the shortage of women in public leadership, and equal academic, economic, and business opportunities. Sound familiar? Are we still dealing with those things 12 years later? I think so. So CEDAW was presented to the Prairie Village City Council in 2018. They passed because I think the majority felt that it favored women. And we'll talk more about that. Interestingly, though, the city did pass protections for the LGBTQ community at that time. So we'll take that win, but we did lose. We won the battle, but we lost the war, shall we say. So my question for you, my friends and colleagues, is will we meet the moment now in 2026? So I would like to step out on a skinny limb here and see a show of hands of those of you who might be interested in making global human rights local through CEDAW. Nice. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. I will say our board of directors has yet to discuss whether we will form a CEDAW task force and how it might fit into our priorities of registering and educating voters about the August 26th primary election and the November midterm elections, of course. But I appreciate very much seeing how this issue resonates with you today. There's so much more to talk about at this conference, more faces and people to meet. Let's return to the gathering. There were many moments that gave me goosebumps or made me sad or made me angry. The interactions between delegates were often intense, as you can see here, reflecting the urgency of the issues before them. The map shows the dense concentration of the abandoned lead mines that I referred to throughout the western United States that harm tribal communities. Look at that map. So many. And we have a picture at the top that shows a member of the Gates Foundation who is discussing innovative funding mechanisms for women farmers. And did you know that 2026 is the International Year of the Woman Farmer? And then sometimes the delegates just got tired and took a break from the intensity. She just took a little nap there. I had mentioned Taiwan. I went to several sessions with Taiwan, and I was extremely impressed with what they've accomplished. After emerging in 1987 from 4 decades of martial law, Taiwan is recognized as one of the most vibrant and free democracies in Asia and worldwide. Their commitment to research and cooperation was one of the highlights of the conference for me. Shown here, the Taiwan Coalition Against Violence addressed gender-based violence in a comprehensive way that is worthy of replication. Notice that they partnered with other countries in their panel discussion, as did most of the panels. Taipei City, Taiwan's legislative accomplishments challenge traditional norms, including lesbian, bisexual, gay, trans, and intersex-friendly adoption laws, a child care allowance for LGBTI families, and the Assisted Reproduction Act for all families. The city also has a Pride Watch, a rainbow voter guide which identifies candidates' positions on inclusive policies, shown here on the right of your screen. And everything they do is very pretty too. They know how to design things and catch your eyes. The panelists from Taipei City were especially proud that their Taipei City Council had a slight majority of women, exceeding the country's quota that government bodies equally represent male and female councilors. Taiwan was one of several countries that discussed having a gender quota in government representation. And if that sounds unfamiliar to you, it's not abroad, but it has never gained a foothold here in the United States. So we're going to go inside the chambers now in the UN, which were quite nice, for the most part. There were many chambers, and they seated anywhere from 50 people to 1,000 people. And this chamber I'm showing you is called the ECOSOC chamber, which stands for Economic and Social Council. And it is where the UN's economic, social, environmental, and humanitarian work is done. As you'd imagine, it had a very good vibe. In the session you see here, 5 ministers from Norway, Sweden, Iceland, Denmark, and Finland spoke about how their rights-based family policies, which consist of shared parental leave for a year for both partners, bodily autonomy, abortion rights, access to universal health care and early childhood education, and equal participation in labor markets. They strengthen families of all forms. These ministers explained that there is pushback now against these family policies, despite being decades old. And the pushback is coming from a group of younger citizens who think these policies unfairly favor women, which is what we heard in Prairie Village in 2018. These ministers, all women, and many with decades of experience, made it clear that their countries will continue these rights-based policies that have made their regions economically viable and socially cohesive. Let me quote one of them. She said, "Gender equality strengthens families. It does not weaken them. It's practical. Children are healthier and families are stronger as a result. There is no economic security without gender equality. And that was Norway's Minister of Culture and Equality. Another title I covet. Okay, next slide. So the photo at the top shows the chambers for the Security Council, which you may have seen on TV. And it is the body that is responsible for maintaining international peace and security, which we know is a very tough job. The bottom photo shows a meeting room where Ukrainian and Polish colleagues discuss their cooperation on immigration into Poland. And that is 5 years running now that they've been doing this. Now, what was equally impressive to me was their commitment to gender equality, despite even as their countries bear the brunt of war with Russia. They are still focused on that. They know where they rank in the Gender Equality Index internationally. That's impressive. One of the presenters from Poland saw my league button and said, "Oh yes, I have met one of your colleagues in Warsaw, and we thank you." I was like, wow, So this session was called Women at the Table, and it emphasized Ukraine's plans to ensure equal representation for women at the peace table and in society afterward. When that time comes, all parts of their society will be heard. It was a poignant and powerful example of cooperation and solidarity that I will never forget. That's the good news. Now here's the bad news. The United States played an obstructionist role at this conference, and I wanted to tell you about it, not to bring down the mood, but it's important that you know. So this is one of those moments at the conference where I felt anger. So as the host country of CSW 70, the United Nations was quite inhospitable, requiring about 10% of the delegates who may have participated in person to attend virtually due to widespread travel bans and visa restrictions into the United States. I heard that some other countries boycotted the gathering in solidarity because of these restrictions. The U.S. went one step further by attempting to block consensus for the first time in the history of this commission. For the first time in 70 years, there was an attempt to block consensus during negotiations. And they cast a lone no vote against the rest of the global community, which risked undermining long-standing commitments to women established in the Beijing Platform for Action in 1995. You will receive a copy, as you leave, of the open letter about this situation from the Europe and North American Caucus, NGO CSW. So they handed these letters out to delegates like myself. Let me just read you a short piece. This letter states, "The amendments to the agreed conclusions proposed by the U.S. were not clarifications, but a deliberate dilution of established human rights commitments towards women. For example, the United States' efforts to strike references to gender and reproductive health would have weakened established legal language designed to protect women and girls." The letter was a stern rebuke. It said, "We reject attempts to reopen a 30-year international consensus for contemporary political signaling. All governments must keep the Beijing Platform for Action as a floor, not a ceiling, for global commitments to human rights. And make no mistake, women will not allow that floor to be lowered, ever." During CSW, I met delegates that rarely spoke of the United States, possibly acting on the old adage, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. But I felt the weight of the current administration's lack of support for women's rights, demonstrated lack of support. So I acknowledged my discomfort to 3 of my colleagues from Japan, Australia, and Denmark at a leadership reception at the Ukrainian Institute. My Danish colleague, Katarina, gently asked me, "Are you doing something to make things better in your country?" I replied, "Yes, I think I am." And she said, "Then you should feel no shame." Katarina helped me shift to a better frame of mind for the rest of the conference. She said, "You should feel no shame." And I really took that to heart. So Melissa and I attended a public tour of the UN called the UN Women's Tour. And it highlights the accomplishments of women in the history of the organization. And we highly recommend it. You've probably seen coverage in the General Assembly of the UN, which UN ambassadors and staff use those earpieces to hear translations in Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. It was fun to try them, but I found it difficult to block out the original language in my other ear. I also recommend tuning into UN Web TV. It's on YouTube. You can watch archived and current UN telecasts. It's like watching C-SPAN, but more eloquent. You can check out the telecast of the CSW 70 conference, where Nobel Prize winner Malala Yousafzai and Anne Hathaway were among the notable speakers on opening day, March 10th. And also another program you might enjoy was the Secretary General's speech to a town hall on March 11th. And I did attend that one, and it was terrific. So the picture where you see me standing in the General Assembly, this was a once opulent space, and it still looks like it in this picture, kind of golden. But I noticed that the furnishings were worn and shabby. The outside of the UN itself needed a good power wash. I mean, there were just signs of deterioration. So it's my belief that this is just one small manifestation of the United States' unpaid contributions to the UN's main budget, which account for 95% of all unpaid contributions. The United States accounts for 95% of all unpaid contributions to the United Nations. That accounts to $4 billion. Now, they did make a recent partial payment of $160 million toward that earlier this year. But I will tell you, the UN is implementing a 20% reduction in its workforce and faces a severe liquidity crisis as a result of these unpaid dues. So I have listed the website for the United States mission to the UN, and you can send them an email and say, pay this bill, if that's important to you. Because having spent time there, it reminded me of, you're in a place where who's watching the world? Who's keeping track of what's going well and what's not? The United Nations is. And they have many arms around the world that need funding. So on a brighter note, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres from Portugal, who is fondly called the feminist in chief by his colleagues, spoke to CSW delegates and gamely answered our questions from a random drawing. He acknowledged himself the global pushback to gender parity and social justice, but urged us to push back harder. He said, "We are seeing the swan song of the patriarchy. The move toward gender equality is irreversible." And I will tell you, it did my heart good to hear a global leader leaning in to DEI. His Excellency's term is ending this year, and there was a definite buzz for the UN to elect its first female Secretary General. He expressed his full-throated support, saying he looked forward to greeting Her Excellency, Madam Secretary General. And in closing, may I say a few words of encouragement from an experienced colleague from Africa who was asked, what advice would you give to other women leaders? She considered it and said simply, "Do not be indifferent." A younger colleague from Ukraine who owns a synthetic diamond mine, a diamond company, was asked the same question. She said, "Don't be afraid to be noticeable, to be transformative, and to lean on each other." So I thank you, my esteemed colleagues and friends, for your attention and for your work on behalf of women and girls in our community. And I will now be happy to take your questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Jane is going to pick up your note cards with your questions on them. I hope you have a bunch of questions, because Colette can sure answer them. This is a good one. What most surprised you about this conference?
Let me mic up here. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay. I think what most surprised me was a couple things. The emphasis on data. I'm not a numbers person, but so many of the colleagues were. They didn't just carry signs around, which was illegal to do that at the UN anyway, but they came to their governments with well-researched positions, and they said their job was to educate the governments about what people were thinking, because their belief was that governments can't do it alone, and I completely agree. That was especially true in Taiwan and the folks in New Mexico. I mean, they were so data-driven, and they were so effective. So that surprised me. The second thing that surprised me was the emphasis on LGBTI rights. I went to a conference that was not about that, but it came up because there was a real recognition that they are a marginalized community across the world and are being displaced, literally from their countries. And so that was surprising, the level of commitment to that community.
So if you had to pick a high point, what did you think was the very best part of the conference?
There were so many. I think sitting in the town hall with maybe 1,000 other people, men and women both, mostly women though, hearing the Secretary General respond to questions of concern, and all the questions were so well thought out. And these were people who had been working on this issue for a long time and wanted to hear, what does the UN think about this? What will the UN do about this? And he had an answer for every question. Now, is the UN omnipotent? Of course not. I mean, they are an organization like any other, dependent on funding and political will. But I can tell you they sure are trying. And I was heartened by that. I didn't know what to expect. There's so much bad news and so much destruction, so much danger for women and girls especially. But it was so encouraging that there are people out there who are not taking that. They're organizing. They're making things better.
You indicated that there were, that basically we were obstructive.
Yes.
So which department or government entity, or could you tell, that was spearheading or providing the obstruction?
It had to be the U.S. mission to the United Nations. Walls is his name. I did not see any of those folks. Those were behind closed doors meetings, but they were instructed to, that was their job for this conference was to present, I heard as many as 70 amendments to this document that is rarely challenged. And I was in a conference call after the conference that said, we were prepared for this, but it was much worse than we thought. But they said we marshaled every resource we had to block these amendments and still achieve consensus. So I have to say it was the UN commission, the UN mission of the United States, which has an office right across the street.
Were there any featured speakers at the larger sessions
Yes.
that were from the United States? You've mentioned several of the others, but did we show up and say we're the hosts and give any kind of speech?
Well, in fairness to the U.S., she's asking if there were any speakers from there. I did go to the U.S. League of Women Voters speech, which showed up big, about the anti-corruption court. There was one other doctor from the U.S. who was in a conference, and one woman from the U.S. working on LGBTQ issues, but we were not dominant by any stretch. I did not see, we were participants. The majority were from the United States and the UK, and then other countries who could get there easily, but we were not a dominant force on the panels, I would say no.
You've given us some ideas of people who you found spoke kindly to you and tried to be respectful.
Yes.
If there was a general attitude from any country about where they were and what was going on in this country, but were there attitudes that you picked up about the U.S. government, in particular, against black and brown women?
So your question pertains to whether other countries perceived us in a certain way?
Mm-hmm. I think that's the question.
Is that right? Okay. Diplomacy was the way people functioned in this gathering, so no one asked me any questions because I was a co-delegate like they were. I had no power like the UN people did, but no one really questioned our positions because I feel like they were already familiar with them. So the answer would be no.
Any other questions? I have one left
Oh,
here.
we have Paula? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should have written it out. Alice Kitchen always headed up the Equality Day
Yes.
for this metro area. And one of the other women pictured along with Alice was Gail James.
Yes.
And at one point, we were active with that Equality Day activity. When I say we, I mean the Johnson County League. But I'm not known our being big participants in a number of years. So are you going to propose something locally, at least around that period of celebration?
Did you all hear that? Do I need to repeat? Okay, so Equality Day has been celebrated in the past by Alice Kitchen, Gail James, and some of the other folks. And we, as a chapter, have not participated in a while. And I agree, Paula, that could be a good thing for us to consider if that is still going on, or to bring it back. And working in concert with the other chapters, especially the Jackson County chapter and some others, as well as in Kansas. And I think that's a wonderful idea to pick up on this idea of gender equality in our local community. Thank you. I wish I could have taken you all with me.
Colette said, are you interested in the task force with regard to CEDAW? If you held up your hands, if you meant it, would you please contact, after we're through here, Colette or me, and give us your names, and then we'll see what comes of it. As she said, the board has not discussed this yet. Obviously, this just happened in March. And we'll let you know what the board decides, and if that is decided to be a project for us to take a look at, then we'll be contacting you. So please leave your names, either with Colette or with me.
And can I add to, Eileen, that I looked up the list of all 70 cities who have a CEDAW resolution or have taken some kind of action like assessing their governments for gender equity, and there is no such group in the state of Kansas. So we would be the first to have a CEDAW measure in our state if we did that.
Anything else? Any other questions? Thank you. Well, this came up, but it's not a question.
Okay.
It's a statement from somebody in this group, and it's my opinion as well. So I'm going to leave you all with that. So, Colette, the world is a better place because you and other women like you are in it. You bring a voice when others who want to speak up cannot. Thank you for sharing our voices at a place where you could be heard around the world.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for coming. See you next month.
Thank you.
See if I can turn this off.
I hope I kept it fairly.